watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is a programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of experts. And joining me today is Sally Wang, international property expert. Sally, good to have you back.
Nice to be here.
It's 2 years since you've been on this
I
programme.
know, yeah, before the lockdown.
Where have you been?
Still in London, haven't been anywhere.
Okay.
I try to.
Busy, I hope.
Yeah, busy,
Good.
quite busy.
Okay. And on your left is Byron Crellin, CEO of Debt Square Group. Byron,
Hi Stephen.
good to see you again.
Good to see you.
How was your trip down from the northwest of England?
-3, lots of snow.
Right.
Nothing down here, it's like the summer.
But you got here, that's the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, on with the questions, and Sally, you're first. Since the introduction of various restrictions and conditions of travel, do the panel think that the introduction of sales and capital to the new homes market has been lessened, particularly in relation to the Asia-Pacific areas? Are you finding a resistance to coming to England at the moment?
Oh, yes, definitely, because our company's clients are mainly from mainland China. And now the restriction coming both ways is not only in the UK, the lockdown and everything, is the Chinese government. So for instance, I haven't been traveling to China, say my parents, for 2 years, because if I do go back now, I have to be quarantined for 28 days, I believe.
28 days?
3 to 4 weeks, I think. Which means somebody will take you from the plane and you have to go to a designated hotel and you have to be tested every day for 3 or 4 weeks. I heard the husband and wife can't even stay in the same room. You have to be quarantined separately and you cannot.
I think there's one or two people might quite like that.
I know, a lot of people tell me that. I'm like, okay. So, you know, this becomes a huge hurdle for Chinese investors or buyers not to come here. It's come here, you know, it's a high risk as well, but going back, they can't do anything for about a month. So we have seen a very interesting shift of buyers. Last year, the sales number has definitely, from overseas buyers, high volume, high price, definitely dropped from our company's perspective. But we managed to do similar amount of sales before at a pre-COVID level in 2020. 2021, this year, we have actually done the historical sales in our company firm. But bear in mind, our firm is very small. Who are supporting these sales? Very interesting. We have a lot of Chinese in the UK. Because of the Help to Buy scheme, we've done quite a few of those. We have Chinese in Canada, Australia, you know, around the world, other than in China, they come in here to buy owner-occupied properties. So owner-occupied properties, I think from our company's perspective, is definitely taking a much higher proportion compared to the investment, for the investment purpose. And also, we have seen Chinese buyers still come to the UK because the kids have to go to school.
Sure.
So I give you a couple of examples. Last year, we have this family immigrated to the UK. They have to buy owner-occupied property, and we are looking at a price range much higher than before COVID level, at least for us. So that's a very interesting shift. The shift is we've seen more owner-occupied deals than investment. We see much higher value in transaction deals for owner-occupied than pre-COVID level. And we see more Chinese from other countries coming to the UK and try to set up a home here.
Okay, that's very good, highly interesting. Have you got anything to add to that, Byron? I know the Asian market's not your particular expertise.
I've not got my finger on it. I suppose the only question is, and we've talked about it on different shows in terms of COVID creating trends, and if you look at a particular stat, you know, occupied versus unoccupied, whether residential or commercial, it can be alarming, or it could be good news, or it could be, well, that's not as bad as I thought it would. In your experience, are you preparing your investors? Are you preparing your clients that this is we're coming out of a pandemic? We might be going back into a pandemic, but it's unprecedented times in the sense that it's unique, and therefore portfolio requirements and demand, etc., is not something that is consistent all the time at this moment. You know, do you think that this is going to plateau, in the sense that markets will just get back to a level pre-COVID?
That's a very good question.
Stephen told me to say that.
I think it's
You can come sit here if you like, Byron.
Give it time.
I think it's a good question. The answer is I don't actually know, because what we experienced in the past 2 years is nobody has experienced before. I never expected our sales to be, we are actually double or triple what we did last year up till now, November. And I don't know how, I didn't even know how that happened.
Good reputation.
But as you say, Sally,
There's a definite demand there.
for owner occupiers, the price level is going to go up, and so therefore, you know, associated fees are going to go up proportionally the same. I think just the real shame is that I think from about June, July onwards, everybody thought, right, we're out of this, we're ready to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And now we've had this minor setback of the new variant, and I just don't know what effect it's going to have.
Yeah.
Whether it detunes people mentally or whether it will put physical restrictions on the amount of business, I just don't know.
Yeah.
But there we are, as you say, Sally. Who knows really?
Yeah, I really like, before last year, I think that I know, at least as a business owner, you ought to know. But now, I don't know what to think of future, and all I can think of is that, you know, we gotta adapt to the change. We have to find a solution. Last year, when there was a lockdown, and our businesses, our buyers are in China, and nobody's coming to the UK, and we have to adapt to the change. So what we did is the social media. We actually built a marketing department in our firm. We started to have online viewings, virtual viewings. We shoot videos. I was running around doing things that I would never do. And before, I never thought a buyer could buy a 4 million, 5 million property without even coming to see it.
Yeah.
And we actually saw that happening.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you know, what future holds. And all we can do now, like at least for me, is just, you know, bow my head and do what I do, and just constantly think of how to adapt to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Okay, thank you for that, Sally. Byron, your question. I'm a commercial landlord and have a property agency who collects my rents. I'm advised by my agency that new rules will be coming into effect shortly. Can the panel expand on what these are to be and the likely timescales?
Okay. So we know that we've entered in, when we came into March 2020 with the pandemic, restrictions came in play on the government to prevent landlords from taking eviction or forfeiture of leases. There was a restriction on tenants in terms of protecting tenants in paying rent. That continues. What we have seen in November is the government update the restrictions of what is then going to be coming through anytime between now and the 25th of March. 25th of March is the trigger date. 25th of March is the quarter day for the rent demands to go back out. And so what we expect and what we now know from the government is that there will be new legislation that's going to be coming through in terms of, and this is something that I think that landlords should be aware of, is that arrears of rent that were issued, arrears of rent that sat within the pandemic will be protected. So we won't come out the other end, legislation will correct itself, and therefore you can then chase your arrears. They're going to ring fence that. And there's, in the piece of legislation that they produced in November, there's a reference called scope, and scope talks about what market sector you're in, because different shops, properties, market sectors closed in lockdown, and then they were opening at different stages. So as an example, a clothes shop was closed, a cafe could open at a certain point but only to do takeaways. The arrears up to the point that they were able to open and trade, whether it be in part or fully, so we've got big national high street brands that were open but aren't paying rent, the arrears will be protected.
But when you say the arrears are protected, do you want to just explain that for our viewers? Protected in what way?
In the sense that a landlord can't instruct Debt Squared or another enforcement agency for the recovery of rent, either in terms of a warrant where we attend a property to recover the payment or where we take possession. So what the government is saying is that if there's arrears, if that business subject to the pandemic has arrears, under the new legislation, under the scope, those arrears will be protected.
And who will decide the repayment plan or whatever arrangements put in place?
Well, the government are quite insistent that the landlord and tenants need to talk to each other. What they're going to introduce is a arbitration period where we're going to have independent persons. And again, we don't have visibility here, so I can answer the question in part, but I think the conclusion is we'll know more at some point, but before the 25th of March. And that's because at this moment in time, what the government is saying is arrears will be ring-fenced. We're going to be introducing a arbitration process. Now, we don't know if that is something that a landlord or a tenant can instigate at a point that there is arrears, but they're in dispute, or whether it's just arrears.
Okay.
And as in, I need time to pay.
Can I ask one question?
Okay.
Does this apply to the residential property world or just commercial?
Just commercial, that piece of legislation. The residential, again, there is ring fence to protect people from being evicted.
Okay.
This is, believe it or not, quite a moving picture landscape in terms of legislation for both residential and commercial. So we have a free access roadmap where you can go onto the website. It's a pop-up box, you can just see it, and you can click on whether it's residential or commercial, and it gives you the very latest.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. Byron, thank you very much for that. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show, so join me again after the break.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and with me are Sally Wang and Byron Crellin. Welcome back, guys. So, Sally, your second question. I'm interested in expanding my buy-to-let portfolio, but in the past have strongly benefited from the Chinese students renting my properties. Obviously, due to COVID, these numbers have diminished recently. So do the panel think this market will come back and come back strongly?
Actually, this market has already come back.
Okay.
So last year, from our company perspective view, is first the lockdown hasn't have that much of a direct impact on our letting, finding the tenants this side. But from last summer onwards until the end of last year, we find there's so many properties get on the market, even including the Airbnb properties. Supply is much higher than the demand. We have last minute drama of people pulling out because the country is kind of asking them to go back, whether study or work. So the rent last year has dropped about 15%. I think in London, across London, we're talking about between 10 to 20%. It depends on different area. Certain areas with very nice lakes, nice parks, the rent further out of central London, the rent probably reduced by between 10% to 15%. In central London, such as Canary Wharf in the city, the rent we're talking about, some of them drop by 15% or 20%. It depends on the building as well. So at that time, I really felt there's a competition between stocks. We never had that feeling before. It's a property on the 5th floor, you're competing with a property on the 3rd floor. View, no view, that becomes so fierce because so many stocks on the market. And at that time, we were thinking, okay, the student market is going to bounce back, but we are thinking maybe in 2 years' time, in 2022. However, this year, very funny, very interesting phenomenon. From June onwards, the students started to come back, and the rent started to bounce back. So we see rent kind of bounce back. Before was 15-20% minus, gradually bounce up. By August, by September, the rent actually bounced back to pre-COVID level already. And we even achieved over, like the price we achieved, some of them are even higher than the pre-COVID. So by September, October, this market is back. Now the letting market, the tenants we're finding, we're approaching December. So we are telling our landlords, okay, now it's getting quieter. And we're very strategically placing our tenants. So if you are a buy-to-let landlord, and I think my advice to you is that if you have the opportunity, when you're buying the property, you got to choose the floor plan very carefully, because I have never seen this before. A property is competing with a property, price-wise, location-wise. Before, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that much, but in COVID, it matters so much. The second advice I think I want to give if a buy-to-let landlords is that you need to tie your tenants up to September, August, September, October, this cycle. You gotta get your tenancy out of December, January, this bad cycle. So sign 9-month contract with them if you can, to bring the contract where the tenancy ends, bring that back to the peak season, and also give yourself some flexibility as well, because we don't know where the market is heading. Yeah.
Sally, what's your advice to landlords that throughout COVID have suffered poor occupancy rates? Should they be tempted to reduce their rentals significantly to get tenants, or do you think it's better that they sit and wait for, as you've said, it's happening to some degree, certainly in the student market, the market's coming back and rental levels are going up? Is it better to just have that tenant whatever the rate, or is it better to sit there and be...
Okay. My best advice is you have to find, if you're using a letting and management company, you need to make sure that you have the best letting and management company on your side, so they can give you advice. The advice is that, you know, in this, I'll give you an example. If you have a property that's completed in April, you have, in this April, then you will have this dilemma. Do I leave it empty and wait until September, or do I rent it out with a much lower rent? Right, that was your question. I think it depends on your circumstances. If you want some money to come in, if you have a mortgage, you want to cover some of the expenses, the advice is probably you want to find the tenant. But you need to find a very good, competent letting and management company to be able to find you the best rent that you can get at that point in April. But that letting and management company needs to think for you, on behalf of you, sign a relatively flexible tenancy agreement. For example, if it is in April, at that time we didn't know the market is going to bounce back this September and October. But your letting and management company needs to let you know the market is changing, the rent is going up, then you know what you need to do. So in April, let's say we signed a 1-year contract with 6 months break clause. So that will bring your tenancy to October. And then that is a good time for you to find a good tenant based on the market rate. Yes, so you have the occupancy, but when the rent goes up, you benefit from that as well. But you need somebody to tell you that, because when landlords are busy, I know they're all busy. So you need them to be able to think for you and make decision for you, give you advice. But let's say if your property is, if your property is completed in June, let's say this year, right? We don't know that the rent is going to bounce back suddenly in July and August. So what are you going to do? So again, we sign 1-year contract, or actually, in that time, in June, we probably will sign, we will sign 1-year contract. So bring the property back onto the market next June. But then we possibly need to serve a Section 21 at some point if we think the rent is much lower. So we need to be able to have we served about 10 or 20 Section 21 this September, because we rent out their property with very low rent during the lockdown, the COVID. But we want to find a new tenant, so we serve Section 21. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a theme that we hear a lot of on Property Question Time, and I think the message is really get a good team around you, get good support. I think that's it.
Get good support, yeah.
Are you finding the same sort of problems in the commercial world, Byron?
Well, I think it was a question I was going to ask Sally, in the sense that you're talking about experience within London. Is that replicant across the UK? Because from a commercial aspect, when we look at portfolios, whether it be a residential, industrial, etc., and we talked about it on numerous shows, the trends are so up and down by geographical that you can't compare it at this moment in time. And you know, surrounding you by experience and people around you to look after you in terms of to navigate you through for what's best for your portfolio, it's imperative at this moment in time.
I think that all the different areas, they vary. So we do
Yeah.
mainly in Birmingham, London and Cambridge, and already I've seen the market are so different.
Yeah.
But then what I'm trying to say that let's say you get a good letting and management company who can be proactive, who are willing to pick up the phone and call the Cambridge local agent. I call my Cambridge contacts, the letting and management, the local letting agency on a regular basis to check. In London, July, August, September, the
To make
rent.
sure that they're moving with the trends.
Yeah, we're moving with the rent. You can always talk to the local experts, but the job that landlords can't do it. But the people that are around you, if they are proactive enough, they should be able to think of that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both very much. Byron, your second question. As a commercial property agency, we have a number of empty, void properties. One has recently been constantly subjected to graffiti and individuals using certain external areas that are covered to sleep in during the evenings. What options other than paying security do we have to protect our clients' properties?
This is I suppose a big spike for landlords in terms of when we went into lockdown, where properties weren't vacant but they were closed and fully stocked. So there was a risk there in terms of potential break-in, theft, etc. But we have seen an increase in terms of, and again we've talked about in different shows, where high streets have become decimated, just they're void. We're working with our clients in a sense, and I think it goes back to a point that you made, which I think was very important in terms of whether you're a landlord or whether you're a tenant, is to make sure that the people around you are working what's best. So we're working with our clients to ensure that certain portfolios that are void are dressed in the sense that if it's ground level, then we'll put hoarding up. Not TV screens, but we'll have static hoarding. We'll have a QR code so you can put your phone over it that says if you're interested in this property, etc. So trying to create some vibes about it rather than just putting horrible steel signs up or boarding the windows up. That just puts people off from walking down. For us, the starting point with any one property, whether it be a corner shop or whether it be a shopping centre itself, is basically provide a free risk assessment report for the client, understand what the client wants, whether this property is going to be void for a period of time, if that's the landlord's intention, because it might be subject to a development in 2022, 2023, etc. Or is it, no, we just want to get tenants back into the property. So then what we'll do is almost stage the property from a security aspect, but also with
Give
50%.
it life.
Give it life. Bring it back to life by marketing. Providing security is just as important of having something that's on the property that creates someone's attention that says, I might be interested in this.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's great stuff. Well look, that's all we've got time for in this show, so thank you both very much. Sally Wang, thank you for coming in again. Byron Crellin, thank you for coming down all this way to London. Good to see you both. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.